Today on The Explainer, we're digging into a really strange question. Why is Michigan taking in millions and millions of tons of other people's garbage? Okay, get a load of this number. Over 3.4 million tons. That's how much solid waste just Canada sent to be buried in Michigan in a single year, fiscal year 2024 to be exact. It's just a staggering amount. And hey, it's not just from our neighbors to the north. When you factor in trash from other states, it turns out that nearly 1 out of every 5 tons of garbage buried in Michigan landfills isn't actually from Michigan. Now, this chart really puts it in perspective. Look at that. Canada completely dominates the imported waste game. That makes us a genuine international issue. And that huge slice, over 14% of everything in their landfills, is almost all coming from just one province, Ontario. So the big questions are, why is this happening? And why can't Michigan just, stop it? Well, the answer is a wild mix of economics, a really surprising constitutional snag, and a high-stakes game of dependency across the border. It's a real puzzle, so let's dive in and start connecting the dots. All right, first up, the 36-cent invitation. This gets to the heart of why Michigan has become the Midwest dumping ground. And really, this whole story kicks off with one simple, almost unbelievable number. Get this. To dump 1 ton of trash in a Michigan landfill, the state charges a fee of just 36 cents. 36 cents. Now look at its neighbors. Ohio, $4.75. Wisconsin, over $6. It's not even close. You can see why it's a massive financial incentive to just ship your garbage to Michigan. And when the price is that low, it's basically an open invitation. The situation has gotten so out of hand that politicians are using some pretty intense language to describe it. Okay, so Section 2, the $80 million plan. This is Governor Whitmer's proposed solution. Now, faced with this, cesspool situation, Governor Gretchen Whitmer came up with what seemed like a pretty straightforward fix. The plan was simple. Take that 36-cent fee and raise it to $5 per ton. The logic? Bring Michigan in line with its neighbors and basically kill that cheap dump incentive for everyone else. But, and this is really important, there was another massive goal here. This wasn't just about stopping the trash trucks. That fee hike was projected to bring in about $80 million in new revenue every single year. And that $80 million had a name, the Renew Michigan Fund. It was all earmarked for supercritical environmental projects. We're talking cleaning up over 24,000 contaminated sites, redeveloping blighted industrial land, giving grants for local recycling, and even cutting down on greenhouse gases from the landfills themselves. So, moving on to Section 3, a constitutional roadblock, and the surprising reason the plan failed. You have a clear problem and a solution with huge environmental benefits, but it got shot down. Why? Well, business groups and lobbyists pushed back, and they pushed back hard. They rebranded the fee hike as a trash tax. Their argument was that this would crush Michigan families, schools, and hospitals by jacking up the cost of pretty much everything. But wait a minute. If the whole point was to stop Canadian trash, why would it hit Michigan businesses? And this, right here, is the central legal twist of the entire story. It's a real doozy. It all comes down to something called the Dormant Commerce Clause. Basically, it's a principle in the U.S. Constitution that says states can't discriminate against commerce from other states or countries. And, here's the kicker, the Supreme Court has actually ruled that solid waste is a commodity. Yep, trash is treated like corn or steel under the law. So what does that mean? Well, it creates this incredible legal paradox. The goal might be to discourage Canadian trash with a special fee, but the reality is you can't do that. Any fee has to apply to everyone equally. So, to penalize trucks from Ontario, Michigan would have to slap the exact same tax on its own residents, its own schools, its own businesses. You see the problem. This constitutional catch-22 led to a complete political stalemate. And the consequences of that stalemate, they're very, very real. First off, that $80 million a year for environmental cleanup, poof, gone. Without the fee, the entire Renew Michigan program and its funding for cleaning up those thousands of contaminated sites just vanished. And at the same time, the clock is ticking. At the rate we're going, experts estimate Michigan's landfills only have about 21 years of space left. That's not a lot of time. Okay, so for our next section, let's talk about Canada's looming crisis.
we need to look at why Ontario needs Michigan's landfills so badly. Because this isn't just a Michigan problem, it's an absolutely critical issue for Canada too. Check this out, 27%. That's how much of Ontario's total landfill waste gets exported. And guess where most of it goes? Yep, the United States. Michigan has basically become their emergency safety valve. And this dependency is getting way more intense now with all the talk about potential tariffs and the U.S. closing the border to garbage shipments during trade disputes. This timeline really paints a stark picture. Ontario is literally running out of space to put its trash. Even if they keep shipping waste to the U.S., they're completely full by 2037. But here's the scary part. If the U.S. border suddenly closes because of a trade war or new tariffs, they run out of space by 2034. That's just around the corner. Michigan's landfills aren't just a convenience. They are a critical but very fragile lifeline for Ontario. And the experts up there, they know they're on borrowed time. This isn't just some abstract problem. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford has actually pointed to the threat of the U.S. president closing the border as the reason for taking emergency action. He's pushing for what he calls economic self-reliance when it comes to dealing with their own trash.
So that leaves us with this massive, complicated question. Michigan's hands are tied by the Constitution. Ontario is literally running out of space. So what happens when this delicate, trash-filled relationship finally breaks? In a world where a state law, a constitutional rule, and international trade policy can all collide inside a single garbage truck, how long can this messy arrangement actually last?